Thank you for joining Direct Women for today's webinar. We will get started in just a minute. All right. Thank you for joining Direct Women for today's Power Hour conversation with Direct Women's 2023 honorees. My name is Kelsey Velma, and I'll be your technical moderator behind the scenes. I'm the Director of Programs and Operations here at Direct Women, and I'm excited to be hosting today's session. Before we get started, I'd like to run through a few quick housekeeping notes. You all should be able to see the screen right now and hear my voice. Attendees, however, are muted, so although all of you can hear me, we cannot hear you. That said, you can still ask questions, and we encourage you to do so. Please submit your questions using the Q&A feature in the Zoom console, not the raise hand or chat features. Feel free to submit questions at any time during today's webinar. However, we will wait until the end of the webinar to address any questions received. Today's webinar will be approximately 1 hour with 45 minutes of content, followed by a few minutes for Q&A. Links to our speakers' biographies will be provided in the chat once the program has begun. Lastly, there will be a short survey at the end of the webinar that we really hope you will complete. It is only 4 questions and shouldn't take you more than 2 to 3 minutes tops. With that, I will turn it over to the moderator of today's program, Sherry Edison. Sherry?
Thank you, Kelsey, and hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this session of the Power Hour conversation with our Direct Women's 2023 honorees. My name is Sherry Edison, and I will be your moderator for today's program. Let me introduce myself by sharing a bit of my background. I currently serve on the boards of Cardinal Health, Inc. and Union Pacific Corporation. Prior to my retirement, I was Executive Vice President and General Counsel of Amcor PLC, and I'm also a proud 2014 alumna of the Direct Women Board Institute and a former member of the Direct Women Board of Directors. For 17 years now, Direct Women has focused on fulfilling its mission to increase the representation of women lawyers on corporate boards. Our work includes identifying highly qualified women attorneys and helping them position themselves for service on the boards of major corporations. Through our programming, Direct Women helps to create a pipeline of women legal leaders who can effectively serve in corporate boardrooms. We also serve as a resource for companies seeking qualified women board candidates. So without any further delay, I'm very pleased to have our panelists, Marie O. Huber, Bobby Liebenberg, and Terry McClure here today for our session. And let me share a little bit about each of our panelists. Marie is the Senior Vice President, Chief Legal Officer, General Counsel, and Secretary at eBay Inc. and serves on the board of Portland General Electric. Marie received the Direct Women's 2023 Distinguished Alumna Award, which honors a Direct Women Board Institute alumna who exemplifies the talents and accomplishments of our alumni. Welcome, Marie. Second is Bobby Liebenberg. Bobby is a senior partner at Fine, Kaplan & Black and a principal at the Red Bee Group and a former chair of Direct Women. Bobby's dedication to Direct Women's important mission was recognized with the 2023 Mary Ann Jorgensen Board Empowerment Award, which is awarded on occasion to a lawyer who has advanced the goal of Direct Women to prepare women attorneys for board service and increase the number of women on the boards of public companies. Welcome, Bobby. And finally, we have Terry McClure. Terry is the former Senior Vice President, General Counsel, and Chief Human Resources Officer at UPS. She currently serves on the boards of Fluor Corporation, Gypsum Management and Supply, Inc., JetBlue Airways Corporation, and Lennar Corporation. Terry received the 2023 Sandra Day O'Connor Board Excellence Award, which honors women lawyers who have served with distinction as directors of public companies and who exemplify the manner in which Sandra Day O'Connor led her life, paving new paths for the women who came after her. Welcome, Terry. So now I'd like to dive in, and before I dive in, let me just say again, congratulations to all of you on these well-deserved honors, and I'm excited to be starting this conversation with you. I'd like to start off our discussions with focusing on each of you personally and ask about your personal journeys with board service. Each of you, I'm sure, has some story to tell with respect to your passion about board service. And for Terry and Marie, I'd like to ask the question, when did you find yourself wanting to serve on a board? What was the catalyst for your interest? Terry, why don't you start us off?
Thanks, Sherry, and thanks for hosting this event, Kelsey. It's great to be here. I certainly became interested in boards, serving as corporate secretary and general counsel for UPS for so many years. I got the chance to observe, good board members, how they helped build the companies, challenge the leadership, really helped expand the view of the organization. And it was just really interesting to see the value that that diverse perspective brought to the work that we were doing as senior leaders in the organization. So in supporting the board, I really got a chance to see how much value board members can bring. And that's what kind of perked my interest and desire to ultimately serving on a board.
Interesting. Marie, what about you?
Hi, everybody. Great to be here. Thank you. Thank you to Direct Women, and hi to everyone on the line. So similar to Terry, and also Sherry and I were both in the same Direct Women class of 2014, so I'm really grateful for that. I've been around boards at HP, at Agilent Technologies, where I was also general counsel and secretary, and then now at eBay. And so also getting to observe that and thinking about the board is the highest governing body of corporations, and being able to contribute at that level, thinking about what's the value, the strategic contribution, and the value add is just really challenging. It's fascinating. It's intellectually stimulating, and it brings together a lot of different disciplines, which I think, as Terry said, having very diverse perspectives from diversity from a really broad sense of that definition, experiences, skill sets, backgrounds, I thought was really, really fascinating. So thank you.
So Bobby, let me ask you from a slightly different angle. You're such a champion for women lawyers as corporate directors. What has fueled your passion for Direct Women's mission and important work all these years?
So thank you. And it's really wonderful to be with this powerhouse panel and to be with my fellow honorees and with you, Sherry. Thank you. When I chaired the ABA Commission on Women in the Profession, I became interested in research by Panelists, by McKinsey, the Credit Suisse Research Institute, about the importance of gender diversity in leadership, but in particular, gender diversity on boards, and why gender diversity on board leads to greater innovation, better decision-making, strengthens corporate governance, and improves the bottom line. And there's also research that shows this really strong correlation between having especially 3 or more women directors, the power of 3, and also why gender diversity on a board increases executive leadership with more women in the C-suite, more women in upper management, and even more women top earners. And the business case became clearer and clearer. As we know, women are more important in the workplace with respect to increased women-owned businesses, greater ownership of stock and wealth. And by the way, the majority of women make consumer decisions. So it makes sense that companies want to have their boards reflect their shareholders, their customers, and their employees. And then as part of the ABA, was very honored to be one of the co-founders of Direct Women in 2007. And when we founded Direct Women, we were actually, there was more skepticism and pushback because we were lawyers as opposed to just being women. There was a real reluctance about women, about lawyers. And so we began to focus, as Sherry said, on our unique mission on how to better position women lawyers to serve on corporate boards because of their strategic and critical thinking skills, their regulatory experience, and their corporate governance experience. And we have been very blessed. 42% of our amazing alumni now serve on a board, and we have reached a record level of 200 board seats.
Well, I love it, Bobby. We are off to a good start here with this conversation. So let's keep going. Thank you very much. I'd like to start by looking on the other side of the equation for a second from the company's perspective and ask each of you about what you think boards, how they are currently evaluating candidates these days. And Maria, I'd like to start with you because you have a unique vantage point. You're still a sitting GC, CLO, and corporate secretary, so you're seeing it from that perspective, but you're also a director on a public company. How would you say boards are currently evaluating candidates these days?
Yeah, so I will first address it from the management standpoint and then from the board and the NomGov perspective. So from the management standpoint, a leadership team might be looking for board members who have particular expertise, who might be able to guide the CEO and the leadership team. Maybe you have a new first-time CEO. Maybe you have a specific need for the business, the trajectory of where it's heading. Perhaps it's in a turnaround, perhaps it's trying to grow into international markets or new product markets. And so you might be looking for directors with particular expertise. On a very practical perspective, you also want people who are going to be really engaged. They want to be on a board for the right reasons. They will really contribute and add value to the discussion, the community, the culture of the board, the leadership, and the company. On the board side, I would say that the board might be looking for somebody sort of similar. There might be certain areas where the board feels like we would love to have maybe a seasoned expert in a certain field, or we'd like to have somebody perhaps who represents a different generation or a different skill set or a different set of experiences. And so they will also be looking at some of the same things the leadership team will be looking at. They also want people who will fit and be, I know fit is one of those tough words, right? But maybe collaborative is a better word. Somebody who can work within the culture and the team aspect of the board. And I once heard somebody ask a really good question. When you're thinking about joining a board, when something goes wrong, and something will always go wrong, is this the group of people that you want to be in a room with? And so really thinking about that, in addition to some of the substantive skills and experiences, what does this person bring to the table? And there's a lot of referencing of board candidates, not just through the search firm, but through people who might know somebody. And so that's sort of, as we get into some tips, thinking about what would somebody who gets called on a reference on you say about you and how you serve on a board?
Yeah. You know, folks always say that board service is a team sport, and I think you've really underscored that in spades. Terry, what else would you add to Marie's comments?
No, I think Marie hit it on the head, and I will really just elaborate briefly on the collaborative nature, because it's not just the board seeking to find someone who can bring their perspective to the table, can challenge and raise questions, but in a manner that's not disruptive to the board. The last thing board candidates want is someone who's going to talk a lot, over talk, and be disruptive in the dynamic of the board.
Yeah.
It's okay to have a differing opinion, but they're very concerned with how that opinion is being expressed and whether or not that takes the board off track, or whether or not people are able to express their opinion, hear others' opinions, and then reach a consensus and move on. And that's extremely important to how the board operates. I think the only thing I would point out is that a good functioning board will have done a good skills matrix. And usually they are ticking the box on, when they're adding additional board members, they've looked at different experiences, different industry, history, various skills that they're looking for that an investor would want to see on that board. That sort of highlights the risk profile of that particular board, the industry that that company is operating in, or some dynamic that's relevant for that board at this point in time. So they're looking for those skill sets that are giving the board perspective in areas that are relevant for where the business is. And so a good board will have a skills matrix. They know where their current experiences and skill sets are of their current board members. They'll also have identified where there are needs. And usually the focus will start there. But I'll be honest with you, I've seen a lot of searches start off with, we're looking for this person. But if we happen to find a good person that doesn't fit those qualities, we'll figure out a way to get them on the board. So, it works both ways. I think they're looking for good, strong candidates. If you happen to have certain skill sets that are needed, then that's a plus, but it doesn't necessarily keep you out of consideration if you come off as a good candidate who's very collaborative and can bring good insights to the board.
Absolutely. Bobby, anything to add to that?
I was going to also mention Terry's skill matrices, and that people looking for a board seat should really look at those, and that these skills may vary. I mean, you see different skill sets being sought now with AI being much more popular, or cybersecurity, or even the supply issues that are confronting companies. So always being aware of sort of what's on the horizon and what are the needs now that a board may need.
Yeah. It's interesting. All three of you have, though, reinforced the importance of the soft skills that we oftentimes forget about. Being able to collaborate, being a good listener, being able to work well with people, particularly on tough issues. So very, very important points to make. Since we're talking about what boards are looking for, I want to digress for just 1 second and talk a little bit about a major player in this effort, and that's recruiting firms. And oftentimes people are wondering, what is their role? And at what point can recruiting firms help me, particularly when I'm trying to go after that first board? And I'd like to step back before asking Terry and Marie about your experiences with firms. And Bobby, get some perspective from you on, do you have a sense today of how many companies rely on recruiting firms to find candidates versus using other sources, word of mouth or whatever, to find ideal candidates for the board?
Well, one of our most, I think, popular panels at the Direct Women Board Institute is our search firm panel, where they really, I think, try to be extremely honest about their role in this process. And I think what comes across in many of the panels is that today, search firms still use and rely on sort of friends and family, and it is still about the network. 75% of all board seats come from network connections, and search firms may be used to vet the candidates that have come from this family and friends grouping, but they're not used as much to go out and look for candidates to propose to a board. I think there are some exceptions to that, especially with mid-cap companies who may not have this wide network and may need a search firm to fill a particular expertise in their skill matrix. matrix, but search firms are still extremely important in terms of getting your name out, that you're interested, getting your visibility up. And I think we're going to talk about, especially as women approach thinking about their first board seat and approaching their CEO or lead directors, how they can be helpful in terms of making a call to a search firm that this person is interested, because that will give you a leg up in the search firm database.
So that then sets it up very nicely to ask Marie and Terry a little bit more from your personal experiences with search firms. What has been your experience, and what guidance might you have on how to best leverage relationships with search firms, both from the company perspective, but also even more importantly, from someone looking for that first major opportunity? What would you say your experience has been, and what guidance might you have? Marie?
So first, from the company perspective, I would say that companies, especially larger public companies, do tend to use search firms for board searches. And that doesn't mean, as Bobby said, that they don't also really rely heavily on their networks. One of the things that especially we as women lawyers, and often at the highest levels of the company, can do is you have the ability to influence what that candidate pool is. Now, it might vary from company to company to what extent the GC and her or his team is involved in supporting the NomGov committee's search efforts, but often the GC or their team is involved, at least to a certain extent. So you have the ability to potentially say, hey, has the search firm reached out to a Direct Women, to the host of other organizations that have board-ready candidates who may not always be at the very sort of most obvious top of the list, especially for the more traditional larger search firms? So really, I would say really think about where you might have the ability to help shape at least the candidate pool. And then from the individual's perspective who might be interested in joining a board, I would encourage you probably have relationships with the people at the number of search firms. And it's not just the top 4 or 5 largest, but there are a number of other smaller, and not even necessarily that small, both that handle operating roles as well as board seats, and not just domestically for those of you in the US, but also internationally, to think about that. And just really reach out to them. Maybe you have a friend or a colleague who can make an introduction for you. Be very clear and crisp, and I know we'll get to that part, and that's where Direct Women can help come in, about what your value prop is, and be clear in your own mind about what you're interested in, because often people will say, well, tell me, why do you want to join a board, and what sort of boards do you want to join, and what do you bring?
Absolutely. Terry, what would you add to that?
I'm very much agree with Bobby's assessment, because I've gotten on boards. I've served on 4, and 3 of them have been through relationships, and 1 was through a search firm. And what I found is that if you were contacted through a search firm for a board, use the search firm and really gain a lot of intelligence. The recruiter will have a really good understanding of the role that's being built, an understanding of who the players are, the decision makers on the board, who has influence, who is driving the search. And so use that resource and get to know as much as you can about the board and the company and the dynamics that are at play in this particular search before you go into it. I also think you have to be very realistic about where your strengths are and what you bring, what value you bring to this particular search. I've been contacted by a lot of recruiters, and I could go down the path, but it really wouldn't serve me, and it's a waste of their time if I'm not really aligned with the needs that they have for that particular board, or if my schedule is not aligned. It's nice to say, oh, well, I might be able to make it work just to get into the pipeline and go down the interviewing path. But I find that that is not very helpful. You have to be clear, your schedule has to be clear before they'll even start talking to you. So you need to be honest about that. And then I think you need to be honest about what you can bring to the table, where your skill sets or values align with what the search firm is looking for. And therefore, you're not wasting anyone's time. And this might not be the right search, but they'll respect the fact that you self-selected out if it's not the right search, and they'll come back to you at the right time when there is the right position available. So, use them very judiciously, and just be honest about what you bring to the table and what skill sets that they are particularly looking for.
So your comments in particular, Terry, is a great segue to the next series of questions that I'd like to discuss with the three of you, and that is talking about strategies. And the primary question is, what can women do to best position themselves as an ideal candidate for a board opportunity? And if you remember, when we were preparing for this session, we came from multiple angles in terms of strategies, and I'd like to unpack that a little bit more. Terry, I'd like to start with you, specifically to something you just said about understanding what the value proposition is that you're bringing. What would you say, how can legal skills be framed as an asset for a board? How would one go about framing their legal background in a way that it is perceived as value add for a board opportunity?
It's interesting. I think for a long time, particularly after Sarbanes-Oxley, lawyers were not valued on boards, and there was this push to not have lawyers on boards. I think that is starting to shift, and I think there is a recognition of the skills that lawyers bring, both the critical thinking, certainly regulatory governance issues, but I think more importantly, if you can position yourself as a lawyer who has helped bring value to your business in your role, understanding the business strategy, understanding how the business grows, understanding how to use your legal skills to alleviate risk for the organization, to identify opportunities. They want to see your legal and business acumen and how it works together. So, that's where I've seen lawyers not be successful. It's when they focus too much on just the lawyering, but as in-house counsel, particularly, or working with in-house counsel, understanding the value of the lawyering plus the business acumen is extremely important. And so I encourage lawyers all the time, get as much business outside of the law department as you can so that you can bring that lawyer plus perspective to the table. And whether it's supporting HR in an initiative or a project or some sort of program that the company is rolling out, showing how your legal skills are then married with the different business skills can really show that you understand and see a broader perspective than just legal risk for the organization. So that would be my advice, is really look at your own background and see where you can add value. For me, I think also is marrying that up with your board search and making sure that you're realistic in saying, these are the experiences that I've had, this is where I can add value, and this is what the board is actually looking for. And being, sometimes we'll be so eager to get on a board that we'll try to make things fit that really don't fit, or you'll ask to be considered for a board that's not really the right opportunity for you. And so I really do think hone in on an industry or a particular business skill that you have that you can align with your legal skills, and then really just be patient to find the right opportunity, particularly for the first board. Then you can branch out after that because you have that board experience. But the first one, you want to have some sort of strong connectivity to the business, either through your skills and background or industry or perspective, that makes you a real value add for that board.
Your comments, Terry, go back to something that you said, Marie, that I'd ask you to elaborate on a little bit more, and that is Terry's talking about packaging your background and your skill set in the most effective way. When I think about the time we spent in 2014 at the Direct Women Board Institute, among other things, what would be some of the highlights or benefits that you got out of that experience that speak to exactly what Terry talked about, really learning how to tell your story?
It was the elevator pitch.
Yes.
And I have to say, when I think about that, I was still nervous to present it, and the discipline that forced. I'm really thinking to be super crisp and clear about why and what value you bring. And I really appreciated having somebody force you to do that, and then to have to practice it in front of other people.
Yeah.
And get that feedback. I'm just so grateful for that opportunity.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It was incredibly liberating to see yourself more broadly. And these are actually your experiences and your skills that you're seeing in a much more broad, effective way in terms of your elevator pitch. Bobby, I want to come at a slightly different angle and ask you about, again, positioning yourself for a board opportunity. A lot of people talk about service on nonprofit boards. What are your thoughts about the value of serving on nonprofit boards? And are there other experiences and skills that you've seen over the years that also are valuable in terms of preparing for the first opportunity?
First, I think serving on especially a large not-for-profit corporate board can be very helpful, because part of it is being able to showcase the skills that you would bring to a boardroom. And many large nonprofits are run like corporate boards. I'm a chair of a not-for-profit corporate board that provides retirement services for lawyers that has over 7 billion in assets. So, which we have great fiduciary oversight. So being able to show your skills in and serve on committees in a not-for-profit could be very helpful, including who is it that you serve with on those not-for-profit boards, because many of those individuals may actually serve on for-profit boards and could be helpful to you in a board search. So I wouldn't completely discount it. I don't know that I would spend all of my time looking for a large nonprofit that would be the segue to a for-profit board. I think in all of this, and I think Terry and Marie really highlighted this, is I think you need to be passionate about what is the organization you want to work with, whether it's a not-for-profit or a for-profit. Why is it that you want to serve, and be authentically interested? Because serving on a for-profit or even a not-for-profit, as Terry said, it's a very large commitment with a large hours that you will spend getting ready for board meetings. If you're on certain committees, you may have more than 4 board meetings. So it is a big commitment. So there has to be sort of that passion and authenticity that will drive you.
One question I have popped to mind as well that has been something that has gained in popularity over the last several years, and that's these director education certification programs. Terry and Marie, do you have any perspectives on the value of those programs, particularly for people getting prepared for that first board opportunity? Any experience or thoughts about that? Either of you?
Well, they seem to have gained in popularity, as you say, whether it's in areas like cyber or climate, or AI probably is going to be the next hot one. And going back to the discussion we were having on skills matrices, I think that boards generally are looking more for holistic strategic thinkers. They don't necessarily want, or most boards don't want, narrow vertical specialists. There are always exceptions to that. And so I think the way I would think about it is, if you would find it a good use of your time and you enjoy learning and you think it might help you become an overall more strategic contributor to the board, I would say, sure, go ahead and do it. But if you think you're doing it and that's going to get you a board seat, I wouldn't look at it that way.
Terry, you're nodding. You agree
Yeah,
with?
I agree completely. It's not something that if you're sitting in a boardroom, we're going to look at. But again, if it makes you more confident when you're in the boardroom and it allows you to speak on subjects more confidently, then I think, and that's certainly, I do it for that reason. When I became compensation chair, I sort of went heavy into the training that's offered for compensation chairs and for compensation committees, because I was genuinely familiar with it, but it's certainly different when you become the chair of the committee. And there's some great deal of helpful materials out there and seminars that are planned that can really elevate your education and understanding in those areas. So I found it to be useful in that context.
I totally agree. Bobby, you've probably used the word network at least 3 times since we started our session. And so I want to ask you a little bit more about how one can use their network to accelerate finding a board seat. What do you mean when you say network?
So when you are thinking about activating your network, it's again going back to that initial question, where are you going to seek, where you're going to look for board opportunities? You probably aren't going to look for every potential board opportunity that is there. So you want to try to figure out who are the directors that you know who could be helpful to you. And I would say in activating your network, the first thing you have to do is to tell people that you're actually interested in getting a board seat. It won't magically happen just because it's in your head. So I think one, really telling your network that you're interested, and then as I said, trying to identify who are lead directors or who's head of nom and gov that you may know that could help you in terms of helping to position you for a board seat. And if you don't know those individuals, are there other individuals who can make that connection? And I would also say that you need, and it's something that we teach in Direct Women, is to really have discipline about activating your network in terms of creating a spreadsheet of who it is that you're going to contact, creating a cadence of when it is that you're going to call them. And you want to develop a relationship. You're not going to call someone up and out of the blue ask them, can you put me on a board? I mean, that's not the way that would happen. So again, what is the cadence in terms of your conversations? If you have developed relationships with a search firm, how do you keep, without getting to the point of sort of being a stalker, that their your name is top of mind? How do you refresh that there's some type of experience that you've now had that a search firm may be interested in and would again bring your name to mind? So I think in all of those things, the network is the most important. As we've mentioned, that's probably where you're going to get your board connection. And so really, really being disciplined about how you approach that network will be important to your success.
You know, those are good reminders. On the one hand, you don't want to sit back and wait to be discovered, but on the other hand, you've got to be disciplined and have some patience in cultivating the relationships in the network over time. Any other thoughts on networks before we move on to some other strategies? Terry or Marie, anything else you would add?
Yeah, I love those suggestions from Bobby, and especially the discipline, because we know it's hard to do that, especially when you're trying to juggle a lot of different things. I would say also think about what communities you're a part of. And by communities, I mean organizations like Direct Women or other groups, or you get invitations to attend various meetings or gatherings, like whether it's a NASDAQ or just through your professional work, or maybe one of the big 4 accounting firms has a board institute. So think about the communities you're a part of and engage with that, and then let people know that you're interested, not in a pushy, aggressive way, is probably said. And I was talking with a friend who was trying to see if she wanted to join or apply for Direct Women, and she gave the very good thought that her board seats came through attending gatherings, or whether it's dinners or meetings, and just the people you meet informally. And so really, obviously you need to be judicious about how you're spending your time, but try to get out there and get engaged. And then the other thing is, if you're in an operating role, make sure your CEO and other members of the leadership team know that you're interested, and potentially other board members, and they might be able to help you.
Terry, what would you add to that?
Oh, I agree with everything. Just two additional points. Don't overlook anyone. My first board seat came from a consultant who supported me at UPS like almost 10 years before he actually came back and said, hey, this board opportunity came up and I thought about you. And so don't, your reputation absolutely precedes you. And so don't lose sight of, and don't assume that any relationships can't lead to a board opportunity. And the only other point I would make is certainly women who are on boards are a good resource, because like me, I'm boarded up. And so I get inquiries and I'm always looking to pass on resumes, but you have to help me identify you, because I keep an inbox full of resumes. But to the point that was made, the cadence at which you reach back out, letting me know what specific skill set or unique opportunity that you've had that makes you a more valuable candidate for a board, help me remember and connect you with something that's uniquely you, whether it's experience in industry, something that you've done that will help me remind me that when a board opportunity comes up in that area, I can refer back to you and reach out to you and make sure that your name is made available.
You know, those are all great points. And it makes me think my mom used to always say, you never know who's watching. And I think there's a big element of that. So in the interest of time, I'm going to collapse two questions because of the fact that you guys have touched upon them, and ask whether you have more that you can share with the audience. It relates to something that we talked about, which is the questions that you should be asking yourself when you're considering a board opportunity, and the due diligence that you should be doing when someone comes. And the reason why this is important to kind of underscore is the excitement that you feel when the first opportunity emerges. And sometimes it's at the expense of asking the kinds of questions that make sure that this is the right opportunity for you, or the right industry, or what have you. And Terry, you in particular have hit on it in many different ways already. But I would ask the three of you, is there anything else you would say about the whole notion of making sure you're asking yourself the right questions, and making sure you're doing the due diligence that you should do to increase the chances that this really would be the great opportunity for you? Anybody have any additional nuggets you'd like to share in that regard?
I would say three things. One is the CEO a person you trust and like and want to work with? Two is, and we talked a bit about this, is this a business and industry that you feel some passion or affinity for, and can really see yourself trying to add value to that? And then third is, if something goes wrong, are these the people you want to be in a room with?
Anyone else?
For me, it's really, I would just strongly recommend know why they're asking you, or why they're considering you for the opportunity, and make sure it's for a reason that you feel you can respond, you can be responsive to. For instance, I had an interview for a board, and halfway through the interview, the lead director on the board says, well, I thought this was just a diversity interview, but you really do have some unique skill sets that would be valuable to our business. So I was like, I thought it was interesting that he admitted that in the interview. But secondly, it made me question, okay, why were they reaching out? And is this really a board that I want to sit on? Ultimately, I did join the board, and it turned out to be for the right reasons. But I certainly didn't want to be put in a situation where I was just going to be a check the box and my contributions to the board would be marginalized in some way. So that goes to the other point, which is, again, just make sure that you feel that you can add value. Because it's nice to go on a board thinking I'll learn, but if you don't have something to add value, then you will be marginalized and you'll just be sitting there when others are having conversations, and it's just not a comfortable place to be.
Yeah, absolutely.
I would add just sort of a preparatory step before you even are talking about why you're doing this. Make sure that you have gotten clearance from the CEO, that they know that you're interested in doing this, that you know what the approval process is in your company. If you're in a law firm, you need to talk to the chair, the executive committee. The worst thing that could happen is you've figured out why you want to be part of this company, why you want to go on the board. And when the call comes, you can't accept because you have not gotten that clearance. So I just wanted to step back to remind people to do that.
You know, Bobby, that's a great call out. And I would ask Marie and Terry very quickly, any guidance to our listeners about how you pitch a board opportunity to your CEO when you're the sitting general counsel or CLO or corporate secretary? We all three of us had those conversations because we all took our first board when we were sitting GCs. Any guidance on how you have that conversation? And what do you say?
Direct and early. Really be very specific in the fact that it's going to help you, and it certainly will help your development, but more importantly, that there's not going to be a conflict. That you agree that you will not pursue any opportunity that creates any significant conflicts on major dates that have already, that are set from a fiscal standpoint or annual standpoint. You know what those board meetings and, annual those earnings dates are. And so scheduling board meetings around those is absolutely critical. You have to be able to attend the meetings, but you have to be able to do your job.
Absolutely. Marie?
Yes, and not only is there not a conflict in dates and your ability to do your day job, but also conflict with the business. And then I would say, to the extent it's relevant, to point out how it can help you. Let's assume you're the general counsel or in the boardroom, be a better support for what the company is trying to achieve, either in the composition of the board or the board effectiveness, or helping the CEO spot things.
Yeah.
And that's really invaluable to be on that other side of the table.
Yes, absolutely. I'm going to start moving quickly. I want to make sure we cover these last few points because they're very important. Bobby, I want to pose this question to you. So often, I'm sure you've encountered individuals who have said to themselves, I'd like to get on my first board by X. It's either, a year before I retire, maybe it's 5 years after I retire, after I've had a chance to travel and do all of these things. But seldom do they think about timing from the company standpoint. How does the timing factor into board search and landing board opportunities? How does that play into how you should be thinking?
I think it's really important, and this is part of sort of the strategic discipline we've been talking about, is when do you want to start doing this? You can't start when you're sort of early in your practice, or even sort of establishing your practice or at the company, because you may be too busy to be able to participate on a board. The other thing is you don't want to start too late, because most boards do have term limits. You're want to at least to be able to serve 10 years at least, if not longer. And so, starting when you're in your 70s is not going to allow you to do that. I think it's also, from our experience, seems easier to start your board search while you still have a position at your company, as opposed to when you're retired. It seems that it is harder if you've left and haven't begun that search. So again, I think thinking about timing as part of this whole strategy that you need to be really cognizant of as you do this. And I think as Terry alluded to, a board search is a marathon. It is not a sprint. It's going to take a little bit of runway to get that first board.
Yeah. Terry, anything else to say to that? I know I oftentimes hear people say that there's like a 10-year window after you've retired where your experience is still relevant and current, and then things start to decline. And so that's kind of another factor in all of this. Anything else from your perspective?
I was going to agree with Bobby. I think that 10-year window is shortening because things are moving so quickly. I think there is a perspective that many companies want you to be a part of and experiencing the changing dynamics in the workplace right now. And so I think it is, if you can do it while you're still working, I think there is a great deal of value in being a part of an organization that is facing some of the challenges that many businesses are, and the experience in transforming and utilizing AI and transitioning workforces. All of those things are very relevant. And I think that can be of help to you. I think 10 years out, things have changed so dramatically, you may not be viewed as valuable as someone who's a little closer to actually working in the business.
So I'm gonna fast forward for a second here just to get Terry and Marie, I'd appreciate your thoughts on this. Okay, we're now, lo and behold, you've landed your first board. And so now the question is, what happens now? And you're getting on that board for the first time. And so now you're faced with being assigned to a committee and thinking about committee service. And then at some point you start to think about leadership. Any words of wisdom about how to think once you've landed a board, particularly that first year or two? Marie, why don't you go first?
Yes, and often a board, as a part of its search, will have in mind somebody who can fill a certain role on a committee. For example, they might want somebody who's financially literate or a financial expert who could eventually take over chair as of the audit committee. They may want somebody with compensation committee experience. And so I would think as you're going in and you're looking at a particular opportunity, look at and ask. They will probably tell you, but if they don't, ask what committees they want you to serve on, because that may also affect whether you want to take that seat or not.
Yeah.
On the one hand, audit is a great overview and you really learn about the company, especially if it's combined with finance, but it also can have probably, at least if it's a public company, at least 8 meetings a year, if not more. And so think about your time, your interest. And then I would also say, and especially if we're talking about trying to get more women on corporate boards, think about how you could get into a position of leadership. And especially as committee chairs, as chair of the Nom/Gov committee, because that is how you bring about change.
Absolutely. Terry, your thoughts on that? You chair three committees of the 4 boards that you serve on. What thoughts would you share?
Yeah, I think it's important to understand how the committee assignments are made, and whether or not some boards, you go on a committee and you kind of stay there your entire career. In other boards, there's a rotation that takes place over a period of time. It may be as committee members leave, or it just may be a regular pattern of rotation to get board members exposure across different committees. Many boards will just, as a matter of course, want you to sit on the audit committee at least your first year before accepting another committee. So it really does differ based on the company. So you need to ask those questions and make sure that you understand the expectations. In terms of leadership, I think it's a great opportunity. I was on most of my boards for a while before being considered for leadership, although one of them came up unexpectedly, literally the day of the board meeting. One of the chair of the committee died the day before. And so we literally, on the spot, I had to decide whether I would be willing to step into that role. So I think it's important to, have some experience on the committee first. I'm always a little concerned if I see someone saying they're taking on the chair of the audit committee and they haven't been on the board for a couple of years first. There are a lot of things to uncover and a lot of things to understand. And that's a great significant responsibility. So if you're being asked to do something like that, I do a lot of due diligence before stepping into that role, because you really just don't know what you're stepping into. So again, I think experience on the committee helps before you take a leadership position, but you may be in an opportunity, take advantage of an opportunity if it comes, but do a lot of due diligence, talk to a lot of people, and know what you're getting into.
Well, before I ask each of you to share your nugget of wisdom, I want to make sure that I give you guys a chance to answer a couple of questions that have come through. One is about the time commitment. You guys have all alluded to that. Can you speak very quickly to what you think the time commitment is in today's governance environment?
I'll start. It can change very quickly. You think that you may be in a good cadence, but you may then get an activist investor that's going to accelerate things. An M&A transaction is going to accelerate things. A major investigation of some sort will accelerate things, and you just have to make yourself available. So meetings on weekends, meetings during the evenings, you have to be prepared and willing to accommodate all of that if you step on a board.
Second question, I'd like someone to take if you can. This is a meaty question. So what recommendations might you have for determining a board opportunity is not a good fit? And I think you've already touched upon it, but how does board service go wrong? Maybe that's the question. Maurice, quickly, anything that you can say to that in response to that question?
Yeah, and I think Terry spoke to this about not doing your diligence and going on a board for the wrong reasons.
Yeah.
I think also really looking at who the CEO is, what that person's experience, skill set, values, where the company is. For instance, if it's in a turnaround, if it's hyper growth, you're going to have vastly different experiences. And is that what you want? And is that what plays to your strengths and your interests?
All right. As I knew we would, we have run out of time. This was a great conversation. For each of you, one nugget, one sentence of wisdom that you can leave this audience with. This has been a terrific discussion. Bobby, I'll start with you.
I'm going to echo something Terry said and what she does, and that is, if you get a seat, pay it forward. Be part of the wonderful Direct Women network that we have. This is a great resource for directors.
Terry? Thank you, Bobby.
I agree. I think my one nugget would be is just continuing to build out your network. And again, don't overlook anyone. Make sure that people know what your skill sets are, your elevator pitch, and know what your interests are, and keep connected.
Thank you, Terry. Marie?
Like Bobby, I would say help to build the community and strive to bring about change, whether it's in the boardroom or outside of it.
All right, that's a wrap. Panelists, thank you very, very much. This was a wonderful discussion. To our audience, thank you all for listening. Stay tuned for more information on Direct Women webinars. Kelsey mentioned that there's a brief survey for all of you at the very end. Farewell. Take care, everyone. Thanks for joining. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you for a great panel.